Beautiful Boy is based on dual memoirs by father and son writers David and Nic Sheff. The film covers the initial discovery by David of Nic's addiction to drugs, in particular crystal meth, and then chronicles over the years a cycle of relapse, rehab, and recovery. Beautiful Boy has been done a bit of a misservice by its marketing team, and through its trailers in particular, they've pushed a version of the film which is really glurgy and very tugging at the heartstrings and Oscar baity. But beyond the award season's hype, what Beautiful Boy really sets out to do, and achieves with some success I think, is tell a very grounded and authentic story about the real process of recovery that people undergo in dealing with drug addiction, and the stress and strain that has on the families of those addicted people. Throughout its runtime, the film capably hands the narrative from David to Nic and then back again, and in doing so really leans on the performances of Steve Carrell and Timothée Chalomet. A lot's been written and spoken about them in relation to the film and their performances in it, and with good reason. If you think about the work of an actor being finding the details of a character that can be communicated on the screen, then both of them do excellent performances here. Carrell navigates his character and his performance through confusion, bargaining, denial, grief, and ultimately a really overwhelming sense of responsibility. And all of that emotional complexity is contained behind his eyes. It very rarely comes out in big dramatic scenes. Unfortunately, two of the biggest ones are in the trailer. Instead, he manages to spend most of the film with all of that pain and difficulty simmering behind his eyes. And while we're talking about eyes, one of the greatest gifts of Chalamet in the film is that he has the look of an addict. He has this gaze that's flat and glazed, and you can tell just by where he looks in a room where he is in his recovery journey. He manages to communicate all of that just with his eyes. Most of all, when either of them have the opportunity to do more, they usually do less. And that's something that really makes this stand apart from a lot of the rest of the award season Oscar bait films, especially the American dramas, that often approach their very weighty subject matters with a sense of self-importance and high drama, where everything has to be done in the most overly emotional way possible. This is a film that's happy to be still, and that's something that is reflected in the direction, in the performance, and in the cinematography, which is frequently quite static, again, at least for an American film. Even when the film's at its most frantic, that's usually communicated through very quick edits with overlapping music instead of the standard shaky camera fare. That stillness in the direction and the performance allows the immaculately realised world of the film to come to life, largely through the work of the production design and cinematography teams. A lot of the film's runtime is set in David's house. It's this sun-drenched space that's full of warm wood tones with lots of art and books clutter everywhere. It feels like a full, lived-in world. And that has a real contrast to the institutional spaces that we see Nic occupy in later periods of the film. The editing of the film is an entirely different proposition. It often feels hectic, the pacing relentless, and it's occasionally aggressively non-linear. At several points in the film, David will be dealing with Nic's addiction, and that will be intercut with an earlier memory of father and son hanging out together when both were younger. When that works, it's revelatory, and it's one of those things that film does so well, because that is the structure of human memory. That's how we think, that's how we experience time and our lives. And that's underlined with a really nice bit of sound design, where the sound of waves crashing against a shore will frequently come back during these moments, even when there aren't any waves on screen, calling back to an early memory where David and Nic go surfing together when Nic's really young. That hectic pacing, combined with the overstuffed, although very well selected soundtrack of the film, can make some sequences hard to keep track of. It's often difficult to work out how long has transpired between scenes, and I was at several points in the film surprised by it being only a few weeks when it felt like in the runtime of the film it was maybe a couple of months. And what ends up saving the film in those moments is the cyclical nature of addiction that it portrays. Chalamet recovers, goes to rehab, becomes sober, then relapses, and the whole cycle starts again. And that repeats several times throughout the film. That kind of cyclical, repetitive structure isn't that common in film, but here it really helps to pin down the occasionally OTT editing style employed. That structure also gives the film its most powerful moments, looking at the butterflies that his family get when Nic gets better, because they're all thinking, maybe this is it, maybe he'll be okay this time. Even when using drugs, Nic tries to be a good brother, a good son, and then everything is thrown away by relapse. In a later scene in the film, Maura Tierney, who by the way is excellent as Nic's stepmom, is driving after him as he flees away from their family home, having tried to rob it. He's driving in his car up this windy, hilly road, and she's driving along behind him, pursuing him, trying not to cry too much, trying to keep her eyes on the road, and she keeps losing sight of him in this windy road that she's going up, covered in trees. And in the end, she just stops and cries at her wheel. And that's a wonderful, powerful symbol for how the film portrays addiction and its impact on family members. In the end, the film's greatest attribute is a non-moralistic portrayal of its story. The characters judge each other, but the movie doesn't. That's coupled with a lack of the endings I've come to expect from movies of this type. Namely, an ending where the addict is cured, where they enter into an uncomplicated period of sobriety and everything is hunky-dory going forwards. Or an ending where the addict dies, usually after realizing the error of their ways, but tragically not getting there in time. This film doesn't do any of that. In fact, it almost has a non-ending, instead just portraying Nic at another point in the cycle of relapse, rehab, and recovery. And that might not be as satisfying an ending to a film-going audience, but it's also a more authentic ending and a more real way to show a story about addiction. That's it from me. Thanks for watching the review. I know that this film will really affect some viewers, and I'd love to have conversations with you in the comments about any kind of thoughts and ideas, both about the film and about its themes that might have come up while you were watching it. That's it from me. Have a good one. Bye for now.